Hello everyone! We finally got some actual new interesting details in the Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger case that is now officially over. Kohberger has admitted guilt, but now the unsealing of the document, the releasing of the documents has begun. And we're gonna be combing through them, so strap in. Today we're checking the newly released investigation reports. There's been five big zip files containing about 50 documents each released so far, and there's definitely going to be more. So for today, we're going to be focusing on the victims, the crime scene, and the autopsies. But do expect about one or two more videos. One of them is definitely going to be covering the timeline, and then for the rest of them, we'll see. I'll just try to group them by topic in some kind of a way that makes sense. At the end of this video, I will also be commenting briefly on the sentencing that took place on July 23rd, where Kohberger was officially sentenced and the victims' families made statements. So we'll briefly be going over that. Now, this is going to be a very sad video, graphic video. We are going to be talking about very graphic details, so if that's not your thing, you're free to leave the video and you can join me in the next one, or you can skip to the sentencing and just check that out. But for everyone who decides to stay, let's get into it. All the links to the sources will be in the description box, as always. Now, this will be a summary from a couple of reports. Different police officers arrived to the scene that day on November 13th, 2022, and they each reported what they saw, each documented what they saw. Some dove into more details, others not so much, but what I'm talking about here is a summary from these different reports. I'll also be including screenshots and, as I said, links down below. Now, we learn that the roommates and the friends that called the police, they only found Xana. They didn't really know about Maddie and Kaylee yet. It was the police officer that arrived to the crime scene first that found the other two victims, Maddie and Kaylee, on the third floor. Now, Officer Nunez was the first to arrive there, and he saw Hunter Johnson outside, he saw the girls outside. He went in onto the second floor, where he found Ethan and Xana. Now, Xana was lying in the middle of her room on the floor, on her back. She was wearing just her underwear and a gray long-sleeved sweatshirt, so I would guess that she was probably asleep or had just woken up when everything happened. She was probably in bed, right, getting ready to go to sleep, or actually asleep. There was red stuff. I have to self-censor myself, as you know, YouTube's guidelines. I can't use the word blood. But yeah, there was red stuff everywhere, all over the room, on various items, on the floor, on the walls, above Xana, the report also says. And she was so covered in red liquid, so completely covered in it, that it was difficult for the officers to tell where exactly her injuries were or the extent of the injuries. Just unimaginable. There were also some injuries to her face, and as we had already heard, she had a laceration between her thumb and her pointer finger on her hand, as if she was trying to grab the weapon, the knife. The interesting thing is, Officer Nunez first thought that Xana was Kaylee and that Kaylee was Xana. And this was because of the roommate DM. This is what he assumed based on what she told him. And she believed she heard Kaylee run downstairs to the second floor into Xana's room, so she presumed that Kaylee ended up in Xana's room. But that is a little bit contradictory because DM also saw Xana lying on the floor in her bedroom as she ran downstairs to Bethany in the middle of the night. And then when they called Hunter Johnson and Emily and their friends over, and they checked again, they also saw Xana still lying in the room. So I don't know why she would assume that. Maybe she assumed that Kaylee was also there. But yeah, that's a little bit contradictory. Either way, we know that Kaylee was on the third floor and Xana on the second floor. Now, from Xana's autopsy, we learned that her fatal injuries were to her heart and her lungs, and she was stabbed over 50 times. Physically, right, how do you stab someone that many times? but also what's going on in here, right? For someone to be able to do that. What kind of hatred do you have to feel? And most of those stab wounds were defensive wounds as well. So she fought for her life, as we had already heard. But yeah, the officers in the reports also say that the furniture was moved, so as if, someone was wrestling and pushed it away as they were trying to get away from the attacker. Also, what is difficult for me to understand is, based on what we were told, right, that it was one person who did this in the middle of the night in a relatively short time span, 10-ish minutes, 4 victims, at least 2 of which were alive and fought back, 2 floors, 1 handheld weapon. How many stab wounds they had and how severe their injuries were just really does not add up with the timeline for me. It's really hard for me to understand that one person could do this, but that's what they want us to believe, and that's what we must believe. Now, Ethan was also found in Xana's room, on the bed, partially covered. It seems that he was wearing only socks, so again, probably asleep or going to sleep, just like Xana. His body was positioned so that the officers couldn't really see his head at first. His head was between the wall and between the bed, and his main injury was to the neck area. He also had some injuries to his legs. There was a large arterial spray above him, so if the red stuff on the exterior wall of the house was indeed red liquid, that would be that. Ethan's fatal injury was a stab to his left clavicle. Now, as for Maddie and Kaylee, we know that they were on the 3rd floor in Maddie's room, both on the same bed. Kaylee was on the north side of the bed and Maddie more towards the south side of the bed. They were both covered with a pink blanket, drenched in red liquid. Red stuff was also on the walls around them, above them, and one officer describes that there was still, most of it was dried red liquid, but there was also still a puddle of still liquid, red liquid. Maddie was sort of lying up against Kaylee is how they describe it, how one officer describes the scene, and she had injuries to her arms, hands and forearms, and also a slash on her going from her eye to her nose. She was wearing a pink short sleeve top, pants, and some jewelry and some false eyelashes as well. Now, we saw Maddie in a pink short sleeved t-shirt in the grub truck video, so I'm kind of assuming that maybe, and considering she also had false eyelashes on still, maybe she wasn't going to sleep quite yet, or it's possible that she just passed out in her clothes because she had been drinking all night heavily. Now, Kaylee was also right over there, leaning kind of half against the wall. She had on her pants, 1 sock, and a black Corner Club t-shirt. Kaylee's face was extremely damaged to the point where most officers just said that she was not recognizable, which is what we learned from her family already, that she had severe facial injuries. Maddie's fatal injuries were a stab to her lung and to her liver, and Kaylee was the only one that had not just stab wounds, but also different kinds of injuries, asphyxial injuries, as if someone tried to suffocate her, and also blunt force trauma, so possibly fists or something else. And she was also stabbed more than 20 times. Absolutely insane. Now, for the rest of the crime scene, when the officers arrived, they obviously noticed that the sliding glass door on the 2nd floor was ajar, so this combined with Dylan's statement led them to believe that that's where the perpetrator left, and they obviously found Murphy, and they locked him into Kaylee's room. Well, they closed the door so that he wouldn't contaminate the crime scene, which is kind of surprising that he hadn't done so in those 8 hours, but that's what we were told. The dog had no red liquids on him, or he didn't spread red stuff anywhere around the house. And they took the dog to the shelter, and Jack came and picked the dog up later, Jack, Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Now, out of the friends and roommates who were at the crime scene, the officers then later spoke to them. They spoke to Hunter Johnson, of course, who, when he arrived there and went upstairs with the girls, saw Xana. He shooed the girls, the roommates, and his girlfriend away out of the house so that they wouldn't have to witness the crime scene. And he went back into the kitchen to grab a knife, as we had also learned from when the phone call was released. He went to grab a knife for self-defense. He went back towards Xana's room. He checked on Xana, he checked her pulse. He also noticed that Ethan was there. When the first officer arrived, Johnson told him basically what had happened, and he still had the knife in his hand, so the officer told him to leave the knife on the table in the living room. So that's what he did. That's where one knife ended up, but of course that wasn't the knife. The officers also talked to DM, and her story is kind of like a chameleon. It changes ever so slightly. It varies from document to document. But in this version, she apparently heard Kaylee scream. At around 4 a.m., she said someone was in the house, and then DM heard Kaylee run downstairs to the second floor and towards the second floor bedroom, Xana's bedroom. That's why she presumed it was Kaylee in Xana's room and not Xana. And then DM said that eventually she stopped hearing a struggle. So she did hear a struggle, and the male voice that she didn't recognize said, apparently, "You're gonna be fine, I'm gonna help you," which is slightly different from the original version, or the version that was in the PCA. Now, we are gonna go over that in more detail in the next video, when we talk about the timeline, the detailed timeline. There's also a lot from the other roommate, BF, in terms of the timeline, in terms of the last 24 hours, what these college kids were doing, the victims and their friends. So that will be interesting. But for now, let me wrap up with saying a couple of things about the sentencing. Bryan Kohberger was sentenced to life in prison, essentially. He accepted the plea deal, right? He pleaded guilty in exchange for life in prison instead of the possibility of a DP had he gone to trial and had he been found guilty. At the sentencing, the families of the victims read some closing statements, and yeah, I mean, it's quite fascinating. You have 4 different families and 4 different ways of processing this situation, processing grief. And within those 4, each individual obviously has their own way of dealing with it.
He will never erase the love we shared, the laughs we had, or the way they made me feel seen and whole. Those things are mine. They are sacred, and he will never touch them. I get to feel sadness. I get to feel rage. I get to feel joy even when it's hard. I get to feel love even when it hurts. I get to live. And while I will still live with this pain, at least I get to live my life. He will stay here, empty, forgotten, and powerless.
You had the Kernodles and Mogens that were quite classy. Maddie's grandma, she had a beautiful speech. She talked about Maddie's childhood, how she gave her a nickname, how Maddie gave her a nickname, their relationship together, their memories together. That was really beautiful to listen to.
When Maddie was about a year and a half old, her papa, Ben's dad, and I were planning to visit the new little family in Oregon. Maddie didn't have an extensive vocabulary at the time, but for some unknown reason, she called bananas ba-deedle-deedles. When Karen and Ben told her Nana was coming to visit, she figured, I say deedle-deedle for that word. So I became deedle-deedle, shortened to Deedle when she was about 6 or 7, and I was Deedle all her life. Maddie's and my birthdays were one day apart, and a couple years before she was killed, she gave me this necklace with Deedle and Maddie engraved on it, and I added an angel wing, and it's one of my treasured possessions.
Xana's sister Jasmine, incredibly mature statement.
In the end, I realized this moment isn't about you. It's about justice for Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie. It's about honoring the beautiful people they were and still are in God's eyes. For your sake, I hope one day you feel the full weight of what you did. Xana's story doesn't end with what was taken from her. It lives through the love she gave, the people she touched, and the legacy her family will protect. Her light still shines, and her voice will echo louder than this pain. You didn't take that from us, and you never will.
Her father, Xana's father, Jeff Kernodle, I think his statement really, it hit me the hardest probably, because he said that he had spoken to Xana that night at around 11:30, and he was considering going to her, to King Road, and had he gone, had he stayed there the night or just, for a couple more hours, he could have been there, he could have done something, maybe not, but it was really sad.
All I know is I was 7 miles away when it happened, and she wasn't feeling that good. It was 11:30, and I almost went over to Susanna's to say, and I would have been sitting right there on that couch, and you had to deal with me. So they would have had a chance, and I regret that, and I regret not going. But the reason why I didn't is because Xana said, "Don't be drinking and driving."
Then we had Xana's aunt, who essentially forgave Kohberger, and she was like, if you're ready to talk, I'm ready to listen.
I'm here today to tell you I have forgiven you, because I no longer could live with that hate in my heart. And for me to become a better person, I have forgiven you. And anytime you want to talk and tell me what happened, get my number. I'm here, no judgment, because I do have answers or questions that I want you to answer. And I'm here. I'll be that one that'll listen to you.
Then we had the Goncalveses, who were as fiery as we are used to seeing them. Yeah, they had a few choice words for Kohberger, which subjectively, not my favorite thing, but on a human level, I absolutely understand why they said what they said. They need to be mad at someone. They need to yell at someone.
Today, we are here to finish what you started. Today, you've lost control.
There is a name for your condition, though. Your inflated ego just didn't allow you to see it. Wannabe. You act like no one could ever understand your mind, but the truth is you're basic. You're a textbook case of insecurity disguised as control. Your patterns are predictable. Your motives are shallow. You are not profound. You're pathetic.
So while I'm disappointed the firing squad won't get to take their shots at you, I'm confident that the men in prison will have their way with you in more ways than one. You will finally get what you wanted, physical touch. Just probably not how you were expecting it. You may have received A's in high school and college, but you're going to be getting big D's in prison.
I just hope all the families find some peace after this. And then Ethan, no one spoke for Ethan. Not his family, not his friends, no one. That was their choice. And we know that his family has been trying to distance themselves from this case since the beginning, and that's just their way of dealing with it. So again, they have every right to handle it the way they did. It was a bit odd, though, I have to say that. So then the judge wrapped the whole thing up. He said, I can't force you to speak about what you did or why you did it, but even if I could, it's questionable if you would tell the truth, right? And that is a fair point, but then again, we still are left with a bunch of questions and very few answers. So either way, it sucks. It sucks for everyone. Now, as I said, in the next video, I will try to cover the timeline as detailed as we're ever gonna get it. Then we're gonna see what's in the other documents. So far, I've gone through about 2 folders, so about 100 or so documents. And there's a bunch more, and there will be a bunch more, so we're just gonna slowly comb through them. So do subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Thank you very much for sticking till the end if you did. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I will see you soon, and yeah, take care. Bye, guys.